And now, ladies and gentlemen, here at the International Awards ESG and Sustainability Conference, before we come to our awards here at the Peers Dining Hall, House of Lords, the UK Parliament here in London, Achieving Net Zero, Pathways to Carbon Neutrality, we are honoured to welcome Dr. Miray Zaki, a distinguished PE and VC investor with a wealth of expertise in sustainable finance and innovation. Dr. Zaki has been at the forefront of driving investments in transformative technologies and strategies that lead to carbon neutrality. Today she will be speaking on Achieving Net Zero, Pathways to Carbon Neutrality, where she will share actionable insights into the challenges and opportunities of transitioning to a net zero economy. Please join me in welcoming to the rostrum Dr. Zaki as she guides us on this critical journey towards a sustainable future.
Thank you. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're all tired, so I shortened the speech to just about 2.5 hours. Ready? Great. A quick online search on the topic will lead you to a very simplistic answer composed of really 3 parts. To achieve carbon neutrality, you just have to reduce carbon, offset carbon, and then do carbon sequestration through direct air capture. But carbon dioxide is not the only culprit. In fact, carbon dioxide gets a lot of bad mouth, if you will. But it's important for obviously plants and everything else. So what are the real causes, if you will? Who are the real culprits? For those who don't know me, I'm many things, but one of them is a simple engineer. So with a simple engineer's mentality, I'd like to sort of go back to the basics. Carbon dioxide is 1 out of 10 greenhouse gases, of which only 4 actually occur in nature. 6 are derived from industrial processes. The 6 that are derived from industrial processes, have a lot of fluorocarbons in them, are the most poisonous ones. And there are scientists in the room, so hopefully they can shed more light if you have any more questions. But the most important one of them actually is methane, and that's one of the 4 that occur naturally. That has actually increased by 2.5 times over the last couple of 100 years. And methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide when you look at a 20-year timescale. So let's focus the conversation not about carbon neutrality, but about achieving net zero when it comes to actual detrimental environmental impact. Because as we talked about before, carbon dioxide is important for all of the Earth sinks, namely soils, forests, deep oceans. All of them require 200 to 800 particles per million for carbon, and guess what? We're at the 420 level, so let's not freak out about carbon dioxide. Also, let's pause for a minute because we talked about industrial revolution and the things that sort of changed since then, but we only talked about industrial revolution these days in the context of the global north, starting in the UK, then Europe, then the US. But in fairness, in order to achieve net zero, if you will, in a global manner, we have to consider the global south as well, which is what we tried to consider as part of the COP28 presidency team. So to summarize, you really need to have a 2-pronged approach in each one of the geographies, in the global north versus the global south. And in each one of those areas, both the global north and global south, you have to look at it from 3 perspectives: the governments, the large corporates, and down to us as individuals. So on the government front, in the global north, similar to the European Green Deal becoming binding legislation in 2021 on all the European Union countries and all of the lovely acronyms we've been talking about all evening, countries should implement their own specific regulations, not just rely on the European Union to do it for them. And quite frankly, if you look at the NDCs that individual European Union countries have, they're actually quite high compared to their contributions today, but it reflects the historical contributions that they've done, if you will, during their industrial revolution. Install taxes and punitive implications on those who don't comply within the timeline. That's already happening in the European Union, but nowhere else around the world. And I can speak for the Middle East and Africa and Asia, and it's not happening there at all. Or in the US, but we're not going to talk about politics here. Installing incentives for nature-based and science-based solutions in the global north, again, is only taking place in Europe, nowhere elsewhere, if you will. But it's an imperative for us to get to carbon neutrality, not carbon neutrality, sorry, I stand corrected, when it comes to neutrality on the negative impacts that we have been contributing to the environment. Accelerating the incorporation of regulation around carbon credits, ITMOs, IREC certificates, and all the similar, if you will, certifications that people use and abuse in order to, guess what, contribute to further polluting the environment. We need to sort of figure out regulation around globalizing the processes by which we can use them and not use them. And last but not least, from a 360 degrees perspective for the governments in the global north to continue to assist the global south countries as part of their nature-based and science-based targets to enhance their resilience and adaptation. It might be worth to mention that as part of the COP28 presidency, I was very proud to have delivered the Loss and Damage Fund, which was funded, if you will, at the COP28 presidency, and it was launched at COP27. However, the target that everyone's been talking about of $100 billion was actually never achieved. Today, we stand at shy of $1 billion of contributions from a handful of countries, which is quite embarrassing if we think about it as the world we stand today. And however many years of sustainability talk we've been ascribing to, if you will. In the global south, accelerating the public awareness of the problem across educational systems and universities and corporates is an imperative. And that has already started in a lot of countries in the global south, especially Egypt, where COP27 happened, and the United Arab Emirates, where COP28 happened. Installing regulation that forces companies to measure, report, and then adopt more efficient supply chains to minimize their polluting GHG footprints. That's also happening in a handful of countries in the global south, including Brazil, but again, needs to accelerate across all other countries that have NDCs announced, obviously, but are not necessarily putting the systems in place to accelerate actual tangible change towards that direction. And adopt a timeline in order to do so. At the corporates level, with increased regulation, they should be able to report better on their levels 1, 2, and 3, and so on and so forth, not just in the global north, but also in the global south. Today, they're all using excuses not to do so on their global south branches. That's why it was very interesting to hear the earlier speaker talk about Sika and their actual approaches. So I'm going to double click on that and speak to you, Julian, I believe, a bit later, if that's okay. These companies can afford to thoroughly revamp their supply chains if need be and capture the low-hanging fruits, for example, rather than flaring gas, use existing technology to capture it and sell it. Sell it to Europe. Trust me, they need it. International Energy Agency estimates that more than 260 billion cubic meters of gas was wasted a couple of years ago. That can literally take out the brownouts and the blackouts from Nigeria for the entire year. But you're still flaring gas. Rather than importing solar panels, use existing sand and localized production of those, or silica, if you will, of these panels and increase jobs and reduce unnecessary negative footprinting of shipping. Rather than expect municipalities to deal with the waste produced, look for circular economy examples like the previous speakers have talked about. And lastly, after all these measures have been incorporated, these companies can then, after they've incorporated all the low-hanging fruits of achieving more sustainable practices, then and only then should they be allowed to use ITMOs, IRECs, and carbon credits to bridge the gap to achieve this net zero, rather than go to that as your immediate solution. At the level of each individual, which is the third prong of the solution, if you will, I long for a time when speaking about environmental footprint is not just a topic for the enthusiasts or esteemed crowd in this hall, but rather it's like maths and economics. No one can live without both in their life. And it would be a topic that everyone knows something about. You don't have to be an expert about it, but because they learned the basics at schools or universities or even at work. For example, a cappuccino using oat milk has less than half of the carbon equivalent footprint of cow's milk. And I'm very happy today that almost half of the people here had vegetarian/vegan dinners, so kudos to you guys. You've had a less than half carbon footprint of your colleagues. Individuals might even consult non-for-profits like the Dutch foodfootprint.nl to better understand their individual contributions to the world we live in through their food intake, which you may or may not know is about 1/3 of global greenhouse gases. May we each contribute to a better future for all. Thank you, everyone.